Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John Dehlin. It's July 15th, 2019, and you are in for a special treat today on Mormon Stories Podcast. For those of you who have been with us earlier today or who have checked out the immediately two preceding episodes, you'll know that we just did a couple hours with Donna and Michael Showalter, who told a touching, heartwarming, informative, insightful, inspiring story of how an Orthodox Mormon mom, when she learned that her son Michael was gay in Provo, Utah, at Timpview High School, former Relief Society president, eventually former Stake Young Women's president, again in Provo, when she learned about her son Michael coming out as gay, his journey to coming out in at Timpview and in their ward and in their stake and in their community, and then her journey to going from an Orthodox mom who didn't want to hear about this and wanted to push it in the closet and make it disappear, to becoming a fully affirming and supportive mom, dealing with Michael's suicidality and depression as it related to going through all this, ultimately to Michael seemingly thriving in a healthy, happy life, and Donna no longer having to spend a couple years of her life worrying about whether her son would stay alive. So it was a very touching, meaningful episode, and we really hope you'll check that out if you haven't yet. It's very inspiring, and it's a story that transcends LGBT issues. It's just about learning to choose love over ideology or beliefs or anything else, to choose love and to choose family. So we're grateful to Donna and Michael for the first 2 hours, to everyone who joined us on Facebook Live. And now we are going to dive into Donna's story. And I'll just give a little bit of a kind of a context or framing on Mormon Stories Podcast. In the past, we have been focusing on former Mormon church leaders. We had Tom Phillips, a former stake president twice. We had, Hans Mattsson, a former area authority in Sweden, who, for all intents and purposes, was a general authority in Europe for the Mormon Church. And we've had several bishops on Mormon Stories, from Scott Purvis to Jason Booth to, I probably couldn't name all the bishops that we've had, because it's like almost every month a bishop or a stake president, a sitting bishop or stake president, is reaching out to me and saying, help, I've lost my faith. What do I do? I'm bishop. It's everywhere. And we just have done our best to spotlight high-level church leaders because, number one, Mormons respect and listen to authority. That's kind of the currency, the lifeblood of Mormonism is respect for priesthood authority. So we know that the people wake up and pay attention when bishops and stake presidents and mission presidents are involved. And of course, I can't forget Roger Hendricks, who we had on Mormon Stories, who's a former bishop, a former stake presidency member, a former mission president. We also had Bill Bradshaw, former mission president, on Mormon Stories a long time ago. But it's also important to do the female point of view. And even though a Mormon woman can't be a bishop or a stake president, they certainly can be Relief Society presidents. They can be primary presidents, and they can serve at least as high as stake Relief Society president or stake Young Women's president. And those are sort of the highest callings a Mormon woman can aspire to, other than being the bishop's wife, as gross as that may sound to some people, or as unsatisfactory, or like the general Relief Society auxiliary or Young Women's auxiliary or primary auxiliary. So in that spirit, we are going to now dive back into Donna's story. Her son Michael's gone to work, and we're going to come to understand how in Provo, Utah, probably one of the most conservative Mormon cities in the world. I think, other than like Alpine or Highland, it's hard to imagine a more conservative Mormon city, I think. And then, as they say in Utah, more east, more good. The farther you go up the bench from I-15 east towards the mountains, the closer you get to the temples, on the east side, and the closer you get to kind of the more expensive real estate, the closer you get to the more conservative membership. So we're talking not only the heart of Mormonism, the heart of conservative Mormonism, the heart of Utah County. We're talking about the heart of conservative Provo, where Donna Showalter would have served as a primary president at some point, and then Relief Society president, and then eventually as Stake Young Women's president. We know how much the church values its youth. How many years in total have you lived in Provo?
16 years.
16 years raising a, what some might have viewed as, at least at one point, the ideal Mormon family or the perfect Mormon family or whatever those appearances mean, with a devout, faithful husband. That's really intense. And so I want to really dive into that now, Donna, and just talk about your story and how a woman with such leadership experience, with such respect, with such a reputation, with such conservative beliefs and hopes for yourself, how you could then navigate a faith crisis in 19? When did it really blow up for you?
January.
Of this year.
Of this year.
So yeah, I remember you reaching out to me. It wasn't just a few months ago that you and I had pizza.
Yeah.
At what?
Pyology in Lehigh.
Pyology in Lehigh.
I've gone there like 4 or 5 times since then. It's really good.
And Donna's worked for, she's worked for BYU. And I mean, it couldn't get more Mormon than this story. So, so in the first couple hours, we started with your story, talking about a conservative Mormon upbringing. You have one of 6 Mormon kids. Is that right?
Yes.
And you talked a little bit about you having a first marriage and a divorce and 3 kids by that first marriage. Mm-hmm. But then with your current husband, sort of like getting married in the temple, having your 4th child, which was Michael. Mm-hmm. And pursuing the Mormon dream. So is there anything we should back up and talk about just to make sure we really paint a good contextual picture for your experience before we talk about your faith crisis?
First, I would say I never aspired to any calling. I just, whatever they wanted me to do,
really?
I was willing to do it. Yeah, like who does that? No, I never turned down a calling.
Because in Mormonism, you don't do that.
No, not if you're faithful.
Yeah.
And I would never have said no. So, also like, living on the East Bench in Provo, Utah, and all that, it didn't seem abnormal or different to me. It's just that's my life. And, it's just kind of an everyday thing. It doesn't feel extraordinary.
Yeah, but it's intense. I mean, Provo is Utah County, and Provo particularly are known as the most intense kind of regions for real Orthodox Mormonism. It's kind of like our Saudi Arabia. It's
a different world.
Yeah.
For sure. It's that bubble. And I remember moving to Utah from wherever we were at the time. I don't remember. But moving to Utah, and the first Sunday, Sounds of the Sabbath, 100.3, and it was on in the car, and I was like, we are in Zion. Like, this is it. Like, they're singing church songs on the radio.
Yeah.
And we tuned in every Sunday, and I knew all the songs and all the artists, and it was a beautiful thing to be part of the bubble.
Yeah. Okay. So what is there anything prior to you coming to Provo that you really want to talk about that would be important to kind of help us understand? You had a devout Mormon upbringing?
I did. So my dad is the only member on his side, and my mom, pioneer stock from England. I'm 6th generation Mormon. My great grandpa was born a twin, so their names were Joseph Smith Harmon and Hiram Smith Harmon. Like,
oh wow!
So super, super devout. Came across the ocean. Came across the plains. Yeah. So my dad was raised in Texas, joined the Navy at 17. His parents signed the waiver, and then met and married my mom, and then went off to Vietnam.
Where did they meet?
They met in Stockton, California. I think he was
like attending church there? Or?
Oh no, because he wasn't. I don't know where they actually met. I don't know. Probably through mutual friends or something, but just like they dated for a little while.
So she dated him as a non...
Yeah.
He was a non-member.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they got married, had my big sister, and then he served in Vietnam, came home. I think he was here for a year before he went back and served in another tour in Vietnam. And I was born while he was in Vietnam.
Wow.
So that second time. And while he was there, he had a friend who gave him a Book of Mormon. I think the guy knew that my mom was a member. So gave my dad a Book of Mormon. He read it and prayed about it, felt that it was true, was baptized in the Mekong Delta, and then went to church every Sunday, which included 2 helicopter rides, those helicopters that go straight off the ground really, really fast. And so they needed to do that so that they wouldn't be killed by enemy fire. But anyway, so every time he would go up in the air, he would throw up. And then they would fly to the next base and he would land and he would throw up. And then, so he did that twice every Sunday. And he was really, really faithful, true believing.
And Bill Bradshaw, who we interviewed on Mormon Stories podcast, former stake presidency member, former mission president, he served as a mission president over the mission that included Vietnam during the Vietnam War.
Really?
So I don't know if he would have been mission president while your dad converted.
Interesting to find out.
But he was, because the Vietnam War, I guess, in theory, went 10 years or more.
Yeah.
But anyway, for those who want to hear what it's like to be a mission president in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, check out the Bill Bradshaw interview. Okay. So your dad, your dad joins the church.
My dad joined the church, came back from Vietnam. He had told my mom that he'd joined the church. And I think my mom and her family were, they were active, but I don't know. They weren't like hardcore. So maybe more nuanced. I don't know. So, but when he came back, he's like, listen, we're living it. And my mom was like, cool, whatever. So they did and raised us Mormon. They had more kids. My dad was in the Navy, so we moved around a lot.
And by the way, Sarah Angel Weaver writes in, Mom sent him the Book of Mormon in the mail. So she's
he did.
She's correcting the story. Hey,
Mom sent. Oh, okay.
I'm assuming Sarah's your sister?
Yes.
So shout out to Sarah,
Hey, Sarah.
Donna's sister.
Okay, so Mom sent him it was one of those ones that's paperback with the blue cover and the angel Moroni on it.
Yeah.
And my dad gave it to me many years ago, and then just asked for it back. So I just mailed it back to him like a couple weeks ago, but I took pictures of all kinds of stuff in it before I sent it back. Anyway, so he came back. They were living the life in the Navy. More kids came. Sarah will know timeline better than me. I'm going to do my best. In 1977, my dad was stationed, I think, in Tennessee, and my grandpa, my dad's dad, came to visit us, and he never came to visit. But it was so cool because Grandpa came to visit. It was anyway. They sent us out to play a lot, and they talked just amongst themselves, and we're like, whatever, But I was like 7 or 8, so I wasn't paying attention at all. And then we got transferred to Jacksonville, Florida. So we were there. I remember turning 9 when we lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and my dad got out of the Navy, and we moved back to Texas. And we actually moved in with my grandpa, I think, because it was kind of, I don't know if it was sudden, but we didn't have a house to live in yet. So we were living with my grandpa. And then one day, I'm 9 years old, one day, all my relatives are at our house, and it's not a very big house, so it's packed full of people, and everybody's crying and really super sad, and I'm like, what's going on? And I think I knew before, but it didn't really make sense to me, and I didn't understand what it really meant when someone is missing. But my grandma had gone missing in 1977, and that's why my grandpa came, because he came to tell my dad and talk over everything. And so in 1979, when we lived in Texas, they found my grandma's body. And so that's why everyone was over at the house. And
Your dad's mom.
My dad's mom, yeah.
Was killed.
Yeah. She, I think she'd been having a yard sale or something. I don't know. I know they talked about it later. She was like OCD clean, like everything has to be perfect. But they knew something was wrong because when they went to her house, there were towels in the dryer the dryer hadn't been turned on, which was, so they were stinky and whatever. Anyway, so they found her because they had been looking for another man who was more prominent in the community. And the man who killed them was in prison in Oklahoma, and he said, if you will transfer me to Texas or whatever, because he was, I don't know if he was being beat up or I don't know, but he wanted out of that prison. If you move me, I'll tell you where I hid this man's body. So they moved him. He drew a map to an abandoned farm in East Texas, and when they found this man, my grandma her body was there with his. So they'd been murdered and thrown down a well. So it sounds like, it doesn't sound like, it sounds like fiction, but I promise it's the truth. Anyway, so my grandma was murdered by a serial killer, and this is and my dad had already served 2 tours in Vietnam, and I mean, this just sent him off the deep end. Lots of trauma surrounding that. So I remember going to my grandma's funeral. I didn't understand, I was 9, and I'm watching all my relatives just crying and crying and crying. And it was so sad to watch them cry that I cried too. But I only have a few memories of my grandma. So I don't know. Anyway.
How did the church help your family deal with that, or did it?
I was so young that I don't know.
Okay. I'm
sure that they were there and supportive, but I was too young to really remember.
Okay. So your Mormon upbringing, what was that like?
We were really orthodox. We did all the things. This was back when, so when we moved back to McKinney, Texas, when my grandma's body was found, the branch was, I think, 6 people, and they met in somebody's front living room. And we doubled the ward, the branch, when we moved in, because there were 8 of us. Maybe there were 7 at the time. Anyway, and so we went, this was when, I think it was, what came first? Sunday school, and then you went home and ate dinner, and then you went back at 5 for sacrament meeting. Anyway, so that was what we did, and we lived far enough out of town that we would pack lunch. So we would go to Sunday school, and then we'd go to a park or something, eat our lunch, and then we'd go back for sacrament meeting, and we had to be really careful not to get our dresses dirty. Anyway, so yeah, just super orthodox. And then at some point, the ward grew, or the branch grew, till we didn't fit in this guy's front room. So we rented the basement of the Baptist church. So the ward then met in the basement there. And us kids, we weren't allowed to, but we still did. We snuck upstairs into the Baptist church and just wandered. And it was huge, and lots of hallways and secret rooms and just interesting things. And I remember going up to the very top floor into the chapel, but there was a balcony at the back of the chapel, and there were no cushions on those benches. It was just like solid wood benches. And then we would look down into the chapel where the benches were white with red velvet cushions, beautiful stained glass windows. The baptismal font was right behind the rostrum. And I found out later, I think that balcony was for colored people, what we would have called colored people back then. African Americans, they weren't allowed to be with the white people down on the cushy benches. Anyway, but eventually we got so big that the Baptists sold us the church. So then we had Mormon church in the Baptist building, which was really, really fun. Anyway.
You don't have a Texas accent.
I did.
Neither do I, by the way.
Are you from, that's right, huh?
Yeah, I lived
I
16
have
of my
it.
first 18 years in Texas.
Okay, if I talk with someone who has one, I slip back into it really, really easy. But for the most part, I got made fun of in junior high school for talking different, and so I learned.
What high school did you go to?
Several.
Oh, okay.
I was actually in Texas until my junior year, and then I moved to California to live with my mom, and went to Stagg High School in Stockton, California.
Okay.
So.
And in Texas, what high school would it have been?
Different ones. McKinney High, and then moved to Howe, Texas, which is a teeny little town in the middle of nowhere. The graduating class, I think, was 15. So, and then Sherman, Denison, and then the Colony. We lived in the Colony, which was closer to Dallas.
A lot of moving around.
So a lot of moving around, yeah.
So what did the church mean to you as a teenager?
It was my social network, I think, more than anything. I mean, I believed it was true because my parents said it was true, and that's what we did every Sunday, and that's how we lived every single day. We had family prayer and family home evening and scripture study. It was just it was our life, So I never questioned. I think at some point, when I was 17, I had a thought that didn't last very long. What if this isn't the true church? Like, what if I just don't know any different? What if there's more? And I remember thinking, I haven't ever gone to another church. I don't even know what another church is like on the inside, let alone what they teach so, but then it's that thought kind of went away over time, probably within a few minutes. And I just plugged away, like, this is just what we do, and even into my teens, it was really my social network. My parents divorced while we lived in McKinney. My mom moved back to California. My dad stayed in Texas. And church was my social structure. It was where I felt safe. It was constant, and the routine was really comforting and safe. It was just what we did.
Did you feel like you had a relationship with Heavenly Father or the Savior? Did you pray about it? What about your internal spiritual life during that time? Or was that not as important back then? It was more social.
It was really social, but I did pray. I read my scriptures. I attended early morning seminary. I was the seminary president my senior year, and it was early morning seminary because it was California. And I remember giving a talk in state conference, and I wrote my talk, and then I'm sitting in the foyer at state conference, and I'm like, oh gosh, this talk isn't right. And I went back and I rewrote basically the whole thing. And so I was like the youth speaker. I got up, I gave my talk, and it was about the Book of Mormon. And we had been studying the Book of Mormon in seminary that year, and I really, truly, truly loved the Book of Mormon. I loved everything about it. I loved the stories. I loved the feelings. I loved how it talked about the Savior. I believed it 100%. And so I gave this talk, went and sat back down. The area authority, I don't remember who it was now, got up and called me back up to the stand to stand beside him at the microphone, put his arm around me, and then to my whole stake, a building full of people, like, this is the most amazing daughter of God. She's an example to us all. And just held me up as this ideal. And I'm like, he has no idea who I am. Cause I was also a normal teenager doing normal teenager things, but, for years after that, I had people, oh, you're the one who gave that talk.
So are you saying you weren't super strict, with
No.
a lot of the things that Mormon youth have to deal with?
Oh, I was very strict.
Okay.
I didn't do drugs. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I dated probably every boy in my stake. Mm-hmm. Went to every stake dance, every multi-stake dance, every regional dance. We lived for stake dances.
Weren't they great?
Oh my gosh.
Weren't the stake dances in Texas amazing back then?
It was amazing. And in California, it was so, so great. We loved it. That's where I learned to dance and flirt.
Okay, when you said he had no idea, you're making it sound like you were wayward privately. But
oh, no. No, I mean, he didn't know my thoughts. He didn't know, I was dating boys. I was also kissing boys, and I thought, there were times when I went to church and the bishop came up to me to shake my hand, and I was like, oh, the power of discernment. He can see into my soul. He knows that I kissed a boy last night, and I felt so much shame because I felt sure that he knew what I was up to. But I was pretty. I don't know. I think I was a tame.
Obedient?
I was an obedient teenager. I wasn't obedient to my mother, right, but I was obedient to the church, I guess,
Okay.
So to my mother, I was top 10 world's most horrible teens. I was awful to her, truly awful. And then had kids of my own, and I've called her multiple times and just said, do you remember that time I did this one thing? I am so sorry. And she's like, I don't remember that. And I'm like, I do. So I was pretty awful to my mom. But as far as church and society and school, I was just average, living my life. I was one of 7 kids in my high school in California that was Mormon. And I felt that, maybe not pressure, but I wanted to be a good Mormon, so that I could be an example to the people around me. So I was proud that I didn't do drugs or drink. I wasn't like, I don't do that, but my non-Mormon friends knew that I didn't. And so if I was ever offered drugs or cigarette or whatever by somebody else would step in and say, no, Donna doesn't do that, protecting me almost. And I don't know, it was really nice.
So what did you do after you graduated from high school?
I immediately got married.
Seriously? To a Mormon kid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So 2/7 of the Mormons. So it was his name was Dave, and he was such a beautiful person. He had an amazing smile. I remember the day he got his braces off, and he came running up to us, and he's like, "I got my braces off," and he smiled at me, and I think that's when I was like, I think I like him. He was so cute, and he looked so good in those Levi's 501s.
Yeah.
Anyway, but he was dating one of my best friends, also a Mormon, and I didn't want to hone in on that, but I really had a crush on him, and I had his senior picture like under my pillow, and I would pull it out at night before I went to bed and like look at it and tuck it back in. And anyway, but she wasn't as into him as he was into her, I think, and he broke up with her at a stake dance, and I felt so sorry for her, and she cried, and it was bad, but then it was right around Christmas time, and he had bought tickets I think we all went actually, a friend group, we all went to see the Nutcracker, and I sat next to him, and I was just in love. Anyway.
So a lot of Mormon girls back then would have gone to BYU or Rick's for a year before, or a year or two, and met someone at BYU and then got married. What made you get married? Just
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
Was he a returned missionary?
No, I think coming from a broken home, I felt like my opportunities were very limited, and the way I was raised too. You're a girl, therefore, this is what your life will be. You will get married, you will have children, you will stay home. The end. And so I'm like, okay, the next step for me is get married. And so
college wasn't emphasized for you necessarily.
No, it wasn't. Okay. Actually, I used to sing. I sang in high school, and I took private lessons and stuff. And I remember one time my choir teacher saying, "Donna, have you considered like going to college? You could get a full ride scholarship for voice." And I was like, my grades aren't fabulous. And he was like, and I could see the look on his face. I don't think it's such disappointment. He goes, "That's really too bad." Like as if he was closing the doors too. He's like, "No college for you." So it just wasn't, and no one in my family at that point. And now when I mean no one, I mean generations. No one had gone to college.
Your mom hadn't graduated from college?
My mom had gone to college, but she didn't graduate.
Right.
So mine college wasn't a thing.
Mine either. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and you hadn't had a older sister graduate from college or anything like that?
No.
Okay. And you met this boy in California?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And you guys got married there?
Yeah.
How old were you?
Okay. I was 18.
Okay.
He was 19. I was way too young.
Yeah.
Whatever. We actually, this might shock some people who don't know me well, but we actually eloped. We ran away to Reno and got married at 11:30 at night on October 30th. So almost Halloween. That would have been bad. But anyway, we eloped. And then a year later, we were sealed in the Oakland Temple. So when I was 7 months pregnant with my daughter, Katie, and my patriarchal blessing said that you will be married in the temple and you will have children born in the covenant. And I'm like, we got to get to the temple quick because I'm 7 months pregnant and this baby has to be born in the covenant because that's the plan. That's what's,
Was the elopement a scandal with your family and friends?
It probably was in our ward.
I guess you hadn't been there years and years and years, so
yeah.
The ward's investment in you couldn't have been as strong as if you had been in the same ward 10 years.
Not for me, but I think it was for my husband because his dad was the bishop.
And what was the ward? Stake? What was that?
It was I think we were
What city again?
El Dorado ward in Stockton, California.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a scandal, and because it was the bishop's son, and his wife was the primary president, and I remember coming home and telling them because we didn't tell anyone, we snuck away. I don't know why we did that.
By the way, Joseph and Emma eloped. So it's not, that's kind of like actually following in Joseph's footsteps.
Ooh, let's not take that too far.
Oh, sorry. At least their initial footsteps.
Yeah.
But Mormons don't know that. So elopement, if it had a scandal, they didn't realize their founder was a part of that. And by the way, they eloped because Emma's dad thought Joseph was a crook and a charlatan and wouldn't have ever given his blessing to Emma to marry Joseph. So
Right.
anyway, you come by elopement honestly, whether you know it or not.
I guess. So we came home, and I remember telling his mom, and we were in her room, and I remember it, and I adored his mom. There are no words. She was the most incredible person. She accepted me from the moment she met me and treated me like family and was kind and treated me like an adult and included me in family functions and stuff like that. And it broke her heart, and not that he married me, but that we eloped. And she said, if you would have just told me, I would have come with you. I wanted to be there. And that really hurt. It hurt me that I hurt her because I loved her so much. So anyway, then a year later, 6 months after we got married, I got pregnant, and then we were sealed in the
L.A. Temple?
Oakland.
Oakland Temple.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Even though Stockton's
like an hour and a half from Oakland.
Oh, okay.
So it's like it's a triangle of Sacramento, Stockton, San Francisco.
Got it.
So.
Okay, so that marriage, unfortunately, you had 3 kids, but that marriage didn't last.
Yeah.
We don't have to dig into that if you want or whatever. Like, Mormon divorce isn't ever a fun thing, right? No divorce is.
It was really rough. Yeah. It was really rough. Up to that point in my life, it was the hardest thing I'd ever been through, hands down. And there are episodes in my childhood that were not pretty.
Right.
Lots of good things too, but up to that point, it was really, really rough. And up until that point, I judged people who had been divorced. Like, what did they do wrong? Did they have affairs? Were they sinning? Like, what happened? Like, there was such a stigma. I don't know if there still is, but at the time there was really a stigma in being divorced and being a single mom. And until it was me, I was an expert judge of other people. But then it was me, and I was like, oh gosh, like I had no idea the hurt and pain involved, and I looked at people who were divorced so differently after that. Like, I looked at them as if their hearts were broken the way my heart was broken, and they were to be treated with empathy and compassion, not judgment. So sadly, most of my life has been lived that I have to live it to not judge it. It's terrible. So, like, I judge people who are divorced until I got divorced. I judge people who had gay kids until I had a gay kid,
People leave the church until you leave the church.
Oh, right? The judgment of people who leave the church.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you already, you had divorced parents.
Yeah.
So that was a hit. Then you marry young, and then you get divorced.
Yeah.
So, like, your Mormon dream so far isn't going so well. Or at least someone might observe it and make that judgment.
Right.
How was that for you to, like, have 3 kids, be a single mom? I'm going to guess in the 80s? Late 80s, early 90s?
Early 90s.
Early 90s?
94.
You're a divorced Mormon mom with 3 kids at age 25. 25.
Yeah.
What did you do?
My ward was so supportive. I remember
again, the Stockton ward?
No, we had moved back to Utah. So we had moved to Utah. We were living in American Fork at that time.
Okay.
So my Relief Society president brought me a bread maker, one of those ones that makes a funky square loaf that's mostly crust. But I was so grateful because I didn't go to college. I didn't have a job in education, no real prospects, and so there was a time where things were really rough. Financially too. Anyway, so I got a job at the elementary school as a substitute teacher. And my bishop checked in on me regularly. There was a day and I still went to church every single Sunday, like nothing had changed as far as my faith, Ward members were incredibly kind. I was a counselor in the primary presidency, I think. And a man came up to me. I was, me and 3 kids Sunday morning on time. And he comes up to us and he says something to the effect of, I've watched your family and I've kind of watched everything go down, and I admire and respect you so much. And and especially your faith, and that even though it's hard, you bring your kids to church with you and you come every single Sunday. And I still remember that. It meant so much to me during such a hard time to have someone acknowledge that this was hard, but that I was doing well. Like somebody said, "You're doing good," and it felt so good. So,
and I'm just going to say it. I embrace all the positives of Mormonism.
Me too.
And I'm not ashamed or scared to highlight that. And it sounds like your Mormon ward really
so many good
rallied
people
around you.
They really,
and provided you with
truly
great
did.
support.
They
And that's
truly did.
that can be one of the amazing things about the church.
Yeah. I remember talking to my bishop. He met with me often. You know, he would call me, "How are you doing?" He would check on me. He would call me into his office and, you know, just like, "How are you doing? What can we help with?" And he was incredibly supportive. At one point, I remember going in, and I won't go into details about how the divorce happened or why, but he basically said, at this point, my husband had moved out. And he said, I was crying. I'm like, "My celestial marriage, like, what does this even mean?" And, you know, and he said, "Can he take you to the celestial kingdom, Donna?" And I was like, "Well, no." And he said, "Then why are you married to him?" And I was like, "Okay." Like, he can't take me to the celestial kingdom. Like, I cannot, it doesn't matter how good I am. I cannot get to the celestial kingdom without, you know, my companion, and my ex-husband was no longer that person. And it was so devastating to realize that, but also the panic of, I've lived my life. And at this point I went from like a kid and you go because your parents go, to a teenager. I wonder if this is true, but I'll just keep going, to, this is what we do, to full blown, like, yes, this is the true church. This is the only true church. And believing every part of it, every single part of it, as far as I knew at that time, with the education that I had. Anyway, so when he said, "Can he take you to such a kingdom?" And I said, "No." Well, my husband had already come and said, I think I want a divorce. And he'd already moved out at that time. And I was like, okay. So we divorced. And then that was really rough. But I still, you know, I went to church every Sunday. I did everything I was supposed to do. I started real estate school with a friend and got my real estate license, started practicing real estate. And then in the process met my husband. We've been married for almost 24 years. So
yeah, we're the same age, and I've been married for 25 years. So you lived a whole life before
I did.
Before, you know, my married life would have started.
Yeah. It's a strange thought, you know, that I grew up really fast, you know.
Yeah.
So
how does it happen that a young eligible Mormon bachelor returned missionary would want to marry
I don't know.
a woman who's got 3 kids?
I don't know.
And is divorced? Like, that's not the Mormon dream for him.
I'm still baffled at that. Like, you could have had anybody. But his sister, conniving, although I'm super grateful, introduced us. And
was she in your ward, or do you know
she was
her?
in my ward?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she was in my ward.
In American Fork?
Yeah. And so a bunch of us young moms took our kids to the park, and we would just play and stuff. And I knew she had a single brother. I knew he'd been home from his mission for a little while, meaning probably 2 or 3 years, which, you know, you're supposed to be married pretty quickly after. He was a menace to society, basically. Anyway, and I'm like, well, he must be broken. Like, there's got to be something wrong with him if he's 23, 24 at BYU, returned missionary, and not married.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong?
But then you didn't have much room to judge at that point.
No,
right?
no, but I still did. So she introduced us. We started out as friends. He worked in Salt Lake and he lived in Provo. So he was at school, but he had like his nighttime job, whatever. So he would stop by my house in American Fork on his way home almost every night. We would read scriptures with the kids, which was new and exciting for me. I wanted to be really devout, and I doubled and redoubled my efforts to be righteous and good. And you know what I mean? Like I felt like I am alone in the world and I have 3 kids. The only thing that I have is my faith, my word, the gospel, the church. It's all I have, and I clung to it for dear life. So the fact that he would want to come over and read scriptures was a thing all by itself. But then that we would discuss the scriptures, not just read them like going through the motions. We discussed it, and he was a deep thinker. And when he opened his scriptures that he brought with him, like he carried his scriptures around, he opened his scriptures and there's like markings everywhere with multicolors. It's like, it's not just like a pencil or yellow or red, multicolored markings. And I thought, he's incredible. And he was in a lot of ways exactly opposite of my ex-husband. And so just in the ways that he was opposite were at that time for me really important. And so his spirituality was really attractive to me. And I don't know that that's why I was attracted to him, but it was definitely points in his favor.
But I'm thinking like, what were my BYU years like? And it's like, go to the Cougar Eat, like go to ward dances, like go to the bowling, go on dates, go bowling, go get milkshakes, go.
He did all those things.
Concerts.
Yeah.
But I just can't imagine going over to a girl's house I'm dating and there's 3 kids running around.
I know.
And studying the scriptures
and
at
helping
her
put them to bed.
apartment and help you put them to bed.
Yeah. We had
with
a
3
house
kids. Like that's
odd.
kind of weird.
And yeah,
Like I would love to interview him to hear kind of how he, I mean, obviously you'd say she was lovely. I loved her. Like she's.
For whatever reason. Yeah. I'm like, I'm sort of baffled, but I to this day, like the love that we have for each other is so deep and strong. And he tells me often how much he loves me and how much I mean to him. And I'm like, but why? I'm not as good as you. I'm a good person, but he has me so high on this pedestal, and I'm like, that I'm not like I'm just me.
That's the same thing you felt when the general authority was talking good. The area authority was talking good about you. It's like if you only knew. You've got this imposter syndrome.
I guess, but like
it keeps popping out
because I know my inner thoughts. You know what I mean?
And thoughts make you unworthy, and maybe in our
and
culture.
I don't even think that I had like unworthy thoughts. Like I think because at that point I had learned to control my thoughts too. Like if anything negative, even a little bit, or sinful or whatever pops into my head, I had ways like of stopping it instantly. Like I could stop it instantly and then move on to something more uplifting. And so, yeah. Anyway, I don't know.
And were his parents cool with him marrying you? Were they worried? Were they stressed? Were they mean? Were they super kind?
Did I meet his dad? No. Okay. At this point, I knew his sister and her family, and I knew him. And I'd met his siblings, I think, and their kids at some point, like Thanksgiving or something. We all came together, so I met them. And I don't remember if his dad was there, but I remember visiting him at his apartment in Provo, and there was a letter on the table, and it said, "Dear Steve," and I was like, "Oh," and I picked it up, and he's like, "Oh, that's from my dad," and I'm like, "Can I read it?" And he's like, "Yeah, whatever," and so I picked it up and I read it, and he asked questions like, "Is she in debt? Does she have obligations to any other family?" It was basically the temple questions. But, is she worthy? What do you know about her background? Like, what do you know about her family?
Does she live the law of chastity?
Yes, we did. And just like meaningful questions that any good dad's going to ask, right? Yeah. Especially like my son, a returned missionary at BYU, is going to marry a woman who's divorced.
Right.
With 3 kids. Yeah. So we had a really long conversation that day where we went down the list and we started at question number 1 and I answered those questions. Yeah, I answered all his questions and I was very honest. Like
with his dad?
No, with him.
Okay.
With him from the letter.
Oh, okay.
I'm like,
so
these are really good questions and these are things that you should know about me. Like we shouldn't be getting married unless you know everything about me. So I unloaded all my baggage on him, so he knew what he was getting into, I think. Anyway.
And you did it. You got married. You got sealed.
We got married. we got married in the Manti Temple. I met his mom 3 days before the wedding, where she brought down from Oregon with her a car full of his things. And I was like, oh, I thought he only had things that were in his apartment, but he had these other things. And I was like, oh, this is weird. And I'm like, where are we going to put that stuff? And he had a mint green polo from 7th grade. I mean, it was stuff like that. And I was like,
And he was moving
cool.
into your apartment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because you already had the kids there.
Yeah, I already had the kids, so he was moving in with us. So, we got married. We had our reception. We went away on an exotic honeymoon to Salt Lake City because we had kids at home.
Do you remember which hotel you stayed in?
Yes, the Carlton. It's right
Okay,
downtown.
fancy.
It was owned by my ex-husband's uncle, so he
Nice.
gave us a deal.
Nice.
Anyway,
Oh.
so we went to. I think he still had his tux. I had my wedding dress, so we put them on. Like on day 2 of our honeymoon, whatever, and walked over to Temple Square and got one of those carriages, with the horse-drawn carriage, and rode in the horse-drawn carriage around in our. Anyway, yeah, it was fun. It was a good honeymoon. Salt Lake has some interesting things. So
Tamara writes, my husband married me when I had 2 6-year-olds and a 5-year-old. He wasn't a member.
Wow.
So
All
we
right.
have listeners who have had similar experiences as you. So when you married your current husband, what was the dream you guys were going to live? Paint for us a 30-second picture of like the life you were going to live.
Sure. Incredibly faithful members of the church who raised our kids to be perfect Mormons, which meant Eagles, Young Women Medallions, Girls Camp, Scout Camp, any calling they wanted us to do. And we had benchmarks for our kids, like they need to do these things. And
If their boys get their Eagles, young men's, young women's, go to seminary.
go to seminary, go on a mission, get married in the temple. We were living the life. I felt like it was good. Life was good. And we were living our religion every single day.
And I guess that would mean scripture study as a couple, individual scripture study, prayer as a couple, family
Yes.
prayer.
Personal prayer, family home evening, the works. And when there was a prophet who said, in the future, family prayer once a day won't be enough. If you want your kids to be firm in the gospel, we're going to have to do better. And so we did family home evening. We did family prayer twice a day, morning and night.
Wow.
We were all in. So, because they told us, like I was raised Mormon and I turned out to be a good person with values and morals. And I really attributed that to the church. Like that was my anchor. And any goodness in my life, me being a good person was because I was a member of the church. And so of course we want to raise our kids that way. We want them to be healthy, happy adults. And this is the way to do it. And it's the only way. There is no other way for your kids to be healthy, happy adults. So,
And I guess it probably couldn't be overstated, the love and generosity of your husband taking on,
oh my gosh,
quote, someone else's
Yes.
kids, right?
Yes.
And
'Cause that's
raising
the
them
thing.
as his own.
He
and
didn't
that
just marry
responsibility.
me. Yeah, he didn't just marry me. He married my family. He married me and 3 kids. He married my children too. You know what I mean? Like we were instant family.
And he became their full-time dad in a way.
He was there.
in a
Yeah,
sense, right?
yeah. Their dad lived in Salt Lake and had visitation, so he had him every other weekend. But yeah, Steve did all the dad things. He got him up in the morning. He helped get him ready for bed at night. He babysat while I went to Relief Society. He did everything. He did everything that a dad, and he loved them. He truly loved them as if he were their blood father. You know what I mean?
They called him dad?
Our younger 2 did. My daughter, she was 6 when her dad left, and 6 when Steve and I married. So we had a really short courting, I guess. Anyway,
Courtship.
so Katie was heartbroken when we divorced. She was Daddy's little girl, and he worshiped her, and she worshiped him. They were buddies, and him leaving was incredibly hard. I tried to make it really clear to my kids that he wasn't leaving them. He left me. He didn't want me, but he wants you. He loves you. That doesn't translate well when he's not there anymore. You know, she felt kind of abandoned, and I think that's normal, you know.
Sure.
But she did see him, and she still loved him. But it was really hard because in her mind, at 6, where she didn't see the backstory and she didn't know everything else that happened, to her it felt like Steve came in and said to Dave, "I'm taking your place," and Dave went away. When I didn't know Steve at all when everything went down and we divorced. But in her mind, that's kind of what it felt like. You know, this guy has come in and tried to take my dad's place, and he wants me to call him dad, and there's no way I'm calling him dad. So there was a little, like, clashing.
I relate to that.
Yeah. So, but he, you know, he tried. He was an incredibly loving, responsible dad. And I look back and I'm like, he went from being a single college kid with roommates to being a dad. And the way he took that on.
That's a steep curve. Like, most people get to ease into it one baby at a time, kind of spaced out,
steep
right?
Curve. I can't. Yeah. He came through with shining colors.
Oh, that's
so
great.
He's a really, really good dad. And I think there were definitely times when he doubted his parenting skills, or, you know, do they love me as much as I love them? You know, all those fears and doubts and stuff, definitely. But he was incredibly loving.
So as you think about the ascent into the Mormon dream that pinnacles with you being Relief Society president and then Stake Young Women's president, what was that journey like for your family? Like, rising to the highest heights of church leadership for a woman, like the journey along the way, what was that like?
I never thought of it as rising to heights. It was just, we go to church every Sunday. The bishop calls you in and says, "I have a calling for you." And of course I say yes, because you do. Because I'm faithful and I'm devoted, and that's how I show my devotion. You know, that's like my sign between me and God, that I'm all in, that I believe and I trust and I want to do whatever is asked of me, and willingly and happily. So never said no to a calling, and I've been every calling there is, truly every calling, nursery, primary, every calling in young women's, including like personal progress, personal progress coordinator, I don't know. Counselor, president in primary, counselor and a president in Relief Society. I mean, at my age, you know, you've pretty much done it all. I've pretty much done it all.
But it is, as I'm thinking about what it must have been like for you, your parents have been divorced, then you're getting divorced, now you're remarried.
Yeah.
There's got to be sort of this transition from checkered past to like, okay, now I've arrived. I'm finally kind of living the Mormon dream, and kind of like, I don't have to be ashamed about my past. I'm kind of like living the way.
Right. And
I do remember that?
I do remember there being times when we first got married that, you know, people would say, "How long have you been married?" We've been married 2 years, but I've got a 6-year-old. So there's definitely a backstory there. And I was a little bit ashamed of it. I was kind of embarrassed that I had been divorced, you know, and that now I have to explain that whole story. And so getting to a point where our family like meshed, and it felt like a real family, and we were like living the Mormon dream, and it was nice to put that checkered past, I guess, behind me, and prove that I was good enough. You know, like, I will do whatever it takes, and I'm going to be super faithful, to prove to Heavenly Father, but also to my ward, to my priesthood leaders, that I'm devoted, and that I'm a true Mormon. I'm a true Mormon. And I wanted to like live down my past, I guess, outlive it. I don't know.
Yeah. So you were kind of working extra hard to prove yourself.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but I guess like I've never been like a mediocre, like I'm all in or I'm all out. You know what I mean? Like in any job that I've had, in school, like I give it everything, you know? And I think it is kind of a way to prove myself, you know, like if they knew who I really am, they wouldn't like that me. So I need to be the very best person and be the most achieving so that I can prove to them that I am good enough. I just want to be good enough. I don't want to excel. I don't want to be amazing. I just want to be good enough.
And were you enjoying,
Sure.
those years?
Oh, yeah.
Enjoying church service, enjoying the role of the gospel in your life?
Very happy, very content. I felt comfortable at home. It was my way of life. It's what I breathed my religion. I lived my religion. It was so much a part of our life that it was like, it was in every single aspect of my life. There was never a waking moment where the church and the gospel didn't have influence on the choices that I made, the places that I went, the people that I spent my time with, what school I went to, who I married, how we raised our kids. Like, our church membership and faith in the church informed every decision every single day.